With a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, blessed is the fruit of your womb, and why is this granted to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? For behold, when the sound of your greeting came to my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy." The baby in my womb. And so from this we learn all are made in the image of God, the vulnerable are valuable, and babies, unborn or born, made in the image of God, are very vulnerable and are to be protected. Questions, comments? I try to be as succinct as possible, the theology of protecting the vulnerable and specifically the unborn. Okay? Now, I want to move to the history of the Christian perspective on protecting the vulnerable, specifically the unborn. This point of view that there is no life that is disqualified from being able to live is very unusual in the history of humanity. It actually is, it's novel with the advent of Christianity. Now again, the Jews had their scriptures and they had this view, but they were a tiny little slice. They were not, the Christian faith universalized some of these ethics. And I wrote this in a blog that we published just a couple days ago, but it really makes the point very clearly that throughout human history, there has been a very consistent living out of the ethic that actually some lives are more important than others, that some lives are so burdensome that we ought to end them. And that was actually what was typical. So here's David Lancy. He's an anthropologist. Among the ancient Greeks and Romans, sickly, unattractive, or unwanted infants were exposed or otherwise eliminated. Just a second.
I know, like.
You good? Okay. Good. Go around. It's, keeping me on my toes. Anyway, back to the Roman Empire. Sickly, unwanted infants were exposed or otherwise eliminated. The Chinese and Hindus of India have since time immemorial destroyed daughters at birth to open the way for a new pregnancy and a more desirable male offspring. The Japanese likened infanticide to thinning the rice plants in their paddies. Among foragers, such as the Inuit or the Javaro, unwanted babies were left to nature to claim. That is by far the majority of the historical record of how people, children, are treated. And Christians began to change this with their view of the vulnerable. And it was very strange to the Greco-Roman world. It was odd, and it actually required some of the early leaders of the church to give an apologetic to it because it was so strange. It stood out so much. And so, deeply at odds with non-Christian cultures, there's a woman named Louise Perry who, she herself is not a Christian, and yet she just wrote a book that I just started last night, and it's called The Case Against the Sexual Revolution, and it's a fascinating book. But she wrote this article called "We Are Repaganizing" in First Things, the journal First Things, and this is what she says. To put it crudely, most cultures look at the powerful and the wealthy and assume that they must be doing something right to have attained such might. The poor are poor because of some failing of their own, whether in this life or the last. The smallness and feebleness of women and children is a sign that they must be commanded by men. The suffering of slaves is not an argument against slavery, but an argument against allowing oneself to be enslaved. Most cultures, perfectly logically, glorify warriors and kings, not those at the bottom of the heap. But Christianity takes a perverse attitude towards status and puts that perversity at the heart of its theology. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong is a baffling and alarming claim to anyone from a society untouched by the strangeness of the Jesus movement. End quote. We all are touched by the strangeness of the Jesus movement, and I think it's patently true that those who are so passionate about social justice causes who are not Christians are living off of a borrowed capital, so to speak. Their concern for the poor or the marginalized is admirable. It's just not rooted in anything other than the Christian worldview that they have perhaps disavowed. And it was very clear in that day that this was the case, because it was so weird to care for those who were outcasts. And specific to the unborn, I'm going to give you several quotes throughout church history at the beginning of the church. So there's one, it was like a Christian teaching manual from the 2nd century, from 100 to 150, around there, called the Didache. And I was actually just talking to Rob Milligan this morning after worship about it. And there's a quote in the Didache, this is from very, very early, and we read some quotes from Scripture, but this is what the Didache says: "You shall not abort a child or commit infanticide." So it's a very clear, direct command for Christians. Don't abort a child, don't commit infanticide. Tertullian, who was a church leader around 160 AD, "For we Christians look upon him," whoever, the man, "as a man, who is one in embryo. For he is in being like the fruit in blossom, and in a little time would have been a perfect man, had nature met with no disturbance." In other words, that little child, that embryo, the zygote, is going to become an individual unless there is some disturbance. Irenaeus, 130 to 202 was his rough birth and death. "Just as God brings an infant which has been conceived in the womb into the light of the sun, and lays up wheat in the barn after he has given it full strength on the stalk." So God brings an infant conceived into the light of the sun, same way as we see in nature. And then Augustine, who lived in the 4th century, 354 to 430, who is the greatest theologian of the church. There is no question. Outside of the Bible, Augustine is the most impactful, important theologian in the history of the church. "We must not attribute to a woman the creation of her child, but instead to him who said to his servant, 'I knew you before I formed you in the womb,' Jeremiah 1:5. The mother's consciousness can induce some special characteristics in the unborn child, but even so, the mother has not made the nature that is produced any more than she has made herself," arguing that the baby in the womb is actually created by God. And so we have this very clear pattern in the early church of not only divine love for the outcast, but also for the unborn. I want to talk to you just a little bit about the Cappadocian Fathers. Who's excited to hear about this? Good, Ken is, and Rob. The Cappadocian Fathers lived 330 to 400, contemporaries with Augustine. Cappadocia is a region in Turkey, and this is where these guys were from. Basil the Great, Gregory of Nyssa were brothers. Okay, Gregory of Nazianzus was the third of the Cappadocian Fathers. The three of them, very, very influential. They were Basil, Gregory were bishops, and Gregory of Nazianzus went on to be the patriarch of the church in the East. Okay, they here's some iconography of them. On the left is Gregory of Nyssa, and his bro Basil in the middle. Gregory of Nazianzus on the right. The three of them were instrumental in articulating the Trinity, which is the central doctrine of the Christian faith. And so they were in on the writing of the Nicene Creed. And if you are familiar with the Nicene Creed, very, very similar to the Apostles' Creed. Nicene Creed is the only creed that all three branches of the church affirm: Protestant, Roman Catholic, and Eastern Orthodox. And so these guys were incredibly influential. But what is amazing about church history is that Basil and Gregory of Nyssa, they were brothers, and they had an older sister named Macrina. Macrina was the oldest of the 9 siblings. And I want to tell you just a little bit about, they weren't just theologians, they weren't just thinkers. So Basil, in 369, he built this massive building, and the building was intended to care for the sick. It was the world's first hospital in 369. And he, in particular, wanted to bring in the lowest of the low, and that meant that lepers were welcome there. And if you don't know what leprosy is, terrible skin disease that has all but been eradicated. It still actually is around in some parts of the world, where your body parts fall off, and it's terrible. It stinks and it's gross. And he he would go and he would minister to these lepers, and he would kiss them on the head and pray for them, and he tended the sick. He was an amazing man, Basil was. Gregory of Nyssa, in the same era, he attacked slavery. And at the time, I mean really, until the 1800s, slavery was just a given. It had always been an arrangement in cultures and history, in the history of the world. Slavery just happened, and no one really questioned it unless it was Christians. Now, to be clear, Christians also owned slaves, and Christians were on both sides of this. So, not saying all the Christians were get off scot-free, by no means. But it was Christians who continued to say that slavery was immoral because we are made in the image of God. And so Gregory of Nyssa, all the way back in the 4th century, he says this: human nature has been constituted by its creator as something free. As such, it is priceless. Not all the universe would constitute an adequate payment for the soul of a mortal. And so slaves, lepers, weakest of God's children, and across the Roman world, there were all kinds of people who were like this. And so you have Basil doing this, Gregory doing this. Well, Basil wrote of his older sister Macrina. She is the best tutor of Christianity that I have ever had, because Macrina was deeply devout. She was so devout that she said that she didn't want to marry because she was married to Jesus. And very, very pious. And so what she did in that era is, at the time, and I'm going to use Tom Holland's book called Dominion that I just finished, that he says this: across the Roman world, wailing at the sides of roads or on rubbish heaps, babies abandoned by their parents were a common sight. Others might be dropped down drains to perish by the hundreds. Few had ever queried this practice. Some cities had made a virtue of it, condemning the death of deformed infants for the good of the state. Sparta was the epitome of this, and Aristotle approved of this. Girls in particular were winnowed ruthlessly. Those rescued were invariably raised as slaves, and brothels were full of women who had been abandoned by their parents. So Macrina, who is, according to Gregory, her, quote, most brilliant of instructors, she would go to the refuse heaps and she would collect these babies. And she would bring them into her home and she would raise them as her own. This is the world's first, what? Orphanage. The world's first orphanage. So it truly is amazing that in the same family, in the same generation, hospitals, orphanages, and the opposition and call for the abolition of slavery. I mean, those are parents that are doing a pretty good job discipling their children, wouldn't you say? And so all of this is to say that historically, Christians have always been interested in the vulnerable, and specifically the unborn. So Christians have always believed in this. They've always believed that we are made in the image of God and we protect the vulnerable. And you can see that secularism is gaining more and more purchase in the West, and that this issue is being disputed in deeper and deeper ways. I don't know if you've followed what's happening in Canada, but Canada is full scale, and actually you can see that those who have special needs or disabled, they're being winnowed through abortion in the West. I mean, the Nordic countries, I think they have I can't remember which country, it might be Norway, has a next to zero of those children who are born with Down syndrome. Well, why? Because they're aborting them. You can test now, and they abort. In Canada, you have it's called MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying Program. It started in 2016, and it started as medically assisted suicide only to those patients whose deaths were foreseeable. It has expanded, and it's continued. There's lobbying to expand it even further. There's a phrase, mature minors. This is actually a phrase that lobbyists are using in Canada to pass so that minors who are deemed mature enough could end their own lives legally. And so that's not law. I'm not saying that it is, but that is something that is under discussion. And so we can see why this is as the West continues to abandon its Christian heritage. And what we as Christians must do is we must stand defiantly and say, no, this is madness. This is not the blessing of the neighbor. This is the destruction of the neighbor. And it is an affront to God, an affront to the image of God in human beings. I do want to talk just briefly about science because there is clarity, even if there is disagreement over how this is applied in the political public realm. I just want to quote a few biology textbooks. This is one, Drs. Greenhill and Friedman, their work on biology and obstetrics. They say this, quote, "The zygote thus formed represents the beginning of a new life." And what's a zygote? It's a fertilized egg. Okay, it's one sperm fertilizing the egg. It's a zygote. It represents a different life altogether. So of course you can't say it's a clump of cells. It's not like a finger or an organ. It's a separate organism altogether. Doctors Potter and Craig write in Pathology of the Fetus and the Infant, quote, "Every time a sperm cell and ovum unite, a new being is created, which is alive and will continue to live unless its death is brought about by some specific condition." Stephen Jacobs, who he was a social scientist for his PhD, he surveyed 5,577 biologists. This is 1,000 different institutions worldwide. And what he did was he sought to understand what biologists generally would say is the beginning of human life. And what came back to him was, of those 5,577 biologists who responded, 5,337 biologists, 96% said human life begins at fertilization. 244% said that it begins at some other time. He also asked about their political affiliation. Interestingly, 89% liberal, 85% pro-choice, 63% non-religious. In the case of Americans who expressed party preference, majority identified as Democrats, 92%. And so it's interesting that that's the political preference, but very clear for biologists at least, the vast majority, that when does human life begin? It begins at conception. I do want to, and even, I don't know if you've heard of Peter Singer. He's maybe the most influential philosopher of our day. He's been at Princeton University for a very long time, and he is a strict utilitarian, meaning that, well, in the words of Louise Perry, he takes the argument that we can abort babies to its all the way down the dusty road to its logical conclusion. And that is, it's quite clear that there is no hard, fast distinction between a baby who is 8.5 months in the womb and a baby who has just been born. And he argues that personhood is actually defined by things like your ability to survive on your own, your understanding that you are in fact alive, thinking about your future, having a history, and for that reason, he argues that we should practice infanticide. And he's actually consistent in his argument, where most people, at least at this time, are not consistent in their argument. But he understands, even Peter Singer, who is saying this, understands what conception is. This is a quote from this philosopher. Quote, "It is possible to give human being a precise meaning. We can use it as equivalent to member of the species Homo sapiens. This can be determined scientifically by an examination of the nature of the chromosomes in the cells of living organisms. In this sense, there is no doubt that from the first moments of its existence, an embryo conceived from human sperm and egg is a human being." So that's Peter Singer, who himself is a proponent of infanticide. And so there is no there really is very little mystery about the beginning of life. And so there's another professor at Princeton. His name is Robert George. He's a law professor, and he has been there for many years. And he kind of summarizes it as there are only three positions that we can take. There's just three positions about this. The first one is to say that humans are no different than any species, and we are just like the animal kingdom. There is no distinction to be made. There is another position that humans are uniquely valuable. They're above other living things, and they have an equal value in dignity. Okay? There's a third position that humans are different than the rest of other species, but they have a different kind of dignity and value, one from the other. And there are a set of characteristics that might define whose lives are worthy or whose lives are not worthy, such as ability to survive, ability to perceive the world, size, power, ability to be productive. And we cannot uphold number one. It's not possible to say that we are just like all the other species. We can't practically live that way. It would be very hard to take a step in any direction without perhaps killing an ant. So we can't take that. What do we do then? Well, Christians believe it's just very, very clear. And so we uphold the reality that we are all created in the image of God. We are all, we all have dignity, and life ought to be protected. And so I do want to then just speak to issue one, because it's really tricky. And as I said, as elders, we wrestled with this deeply because we have not spoken on an issue ever. And this is the first time that we have done this. And why are we doing this? Well, we think it's an incredibly pressing moral and spiritual issue. And I think one important thing to note is that long before abortion became a political issue, it was a theological and spiritual issue for Christians. And so when politics begins to present an option that is deeply contradictory with the Christian understanding of the world, it actually is incumbent upon Christians to respond. We want the flourishing of our state, the state of Ohio. And if we want the flourishing of our state, then we want people to be, we want babies to be born. And so I do think there are really important questions about this. And I just wanted to put three of them out there. One is, are we telling people how to vote? And isn't that illegal? Well, we've learned that actually speaking about issues that are before the voting public, it's perfectly legal for churches to speak to these matters. And so that, and I want to be clear, you might disagree with this. Now, I'm not sure where everybody is. It might be that the only people here are the people who most vociferously agree that issue one's bad. That might be the case. If it's not the case, and you are not really sure what to make of this, I want to be clear that we are attempting to persuade and use all of the things that I've just spoken of and the other things that you'll hear to persuade you that this is the right thing to vote for. Now, you might disagree and you might vote differently, and that's your decision. That's between you and the Lord. But what we do want to do is we want to humbly but clearly persuade on this particular issue. Isn't this a matter of conscience? That's another thing. That's a question actually that came up in a small group is wait a minute, I thought we just talked about respecting each other's consciences. And I think that's a very good question to ask, because is it a matter of conscience? And here I want to refer to Pastor Ken, who has taught a great class on conscience. If you haven't been there for it, he's actually going to teach it again on November the 7th, on voting day. And what Ken articulates is these different levels of decisions that Christians have to make. One is, the level one is those things that Christians must believe in order to be Christians. So you can't say that you're a Christian and not believe in the Trinity, not believe in the substitutional death of Christ, that he rose from the dead literally, etc., etc. Those are things that if you're going to be a Christian, you have to believe those things. And to deny those things is by definition to not be a Christian. Okay? The next level is those issues or topics that all Christians should believe, but that not all do. And it doesn't make you not a Christian, but it is something that ought to be brought to your attention and ought to be like you ought to be confronted. And that's what Paul does in 1 Corinthians. I mean, the book that we just finished working through, Paul talks about how they weren't disciplining a member of the church who was sleeping with the stepmom. And then in chapter 6, right after that, he talks about how it apparently some of the members of the church were still practicing temple worship, temple prostitution. And he says, by no means. Don't you know that your body is actually a temple of the Holy Spirit? So this is something Christians should believe. That's level 2. Does that make sense? Everybody with me? Level 1, level 2. Level 3 is denominational differences. These are just, there's evidence in the Bible, pro and contra. That would include things like, when do we baptize? Do we baptize infants, or do we baptize believing, children who are of an age where they can believe and confess faith in Christ? That's how we view the Lord's Supper. How we view whether elders should be men only or men and women. Those are denominational differences, okay, that we can argue back and forth on, and Christians who respect one another can come to different conclusions. So that's level 3. Level 4 is things like Paul talked about that we don't want to, like drinking alcohol is a great example of a level 4. You might in your conscience say, now I'm talking about those who are over 21, okay? If you're under 21, I don't care if your conscience tells you it's just fine, it's not. But if you're over 21, you might be convinced that it's not okay to drink for various reasons. Or you might be convinced that it's a gift from God that you can drink in moderation, and that's fine. We would put this issue of the defense of the unborn as a level 2 issue. In other words, an issue that all Christians ought to believe based on the scriptures and the history and so on, and our commitment to the vulnerable. And so not all Christians believe that, and that's okay. This is a place for us to be able to work these things out. But that's related to conscience. And then the third one is slippery slope. I mean, if we start here, are we going to have party endorsements and candidate endorsements? The answer is very clearly no. We will never do that. And that is because political parties are a mixed bag. I mean, and so are candidates, obviously. So we are not going to endorse candidates for president or one particular party or another. And this is a decision through and through that we like for issue 1, it was an elder-led decision, an elder discussion. But I just want to be clear, there is no slippery slope. Although, if another issue were to come forward that we're so clearly against, what we're talking about fundamentally is anthropology. And the Christian view of the human person is attacked all the time. And it's attacked throughout church history. What was slavery? Well, the issue of slavery was an issue of anthropology. Are all humans actually all human and equal of value and protection? And there are all kinds of anthropological assaults on the Christian worldview today that no need to go into those. You know what they are, most likely. So if there were another issue that were coming up, would we want to speak up that were a level 2 issue? We would. But we feel very strongly that this is one of those. Don't know if another one will come about, but we don't think that we are vulnerable to the slippery slope. So I hope those answer your questions. You might have other questions about why we're speaking about issue 1. This would be a good time to ask them. Any questions? Comments? Okay.
Wow, that was really good. That was really interesting. Thank you so much.
PDHC's been around for over 42 years. And when Pastor David was talking about the vulnerable, that's exactly who we serve. So we are a faith-based service organization. I can't imagine the thousands of lives that we have saved over the last 42 years. And I really want to talk about the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual services that we supply to every woman, individual, family coming to us for help. So we truly care about the mom and the baby and the family. We've seen a breakdown of the family unit, which is causing the rise in abortions. And I thought I would share a little bit of information with you. So the 2022 abortion report just came out just about a week ago. And in the state of Ohio, we went down a little bit. So the previous year, we were over 21,000 abortions in the state of Ohio. Franklin County is the 4th highest county in the state of Ohio for abortions. So this year, Franklin County had 2,746 of those 18,488 abortions. So the 4th highest in the state. But what's really a pattern and a concern is chemical abortions. So where surgical abortions used to be how abortions were provided, now it's chemical abortions. So in this report, I just ran these numbers and I'm just blown away. The previous year, chemical abortions in Franklin County represented 81% of abortions. This report, it went up to 87% of abortions. So I counted, there were 356 surgical abortions. The rest of those 2,746 abortions were chemical. And I don't know how much information you know about the abortion pill, but it's a 2-drug protocol. And so the first drug is taken, okay, and the second drug is taken 24 to 48 hours later, okay? So the first drug blocks the progesterone to the baby. We all know God gave women progesterone so that we could have healthy babies, right? That's what the baby needs to thrive and survive. Well, the chemical abortion pill is a chemical process that blocks that progesterone to the baby. So what it does is it starves the baby, okay, and causes the baby to die. The second set of pills that they take is what expels the deceased baby from the mother's uterus, okay? So that's what chemical abortion is. The problem is it's very traumatic, okay? We see women every day that have started a chemical abortion. It's very traumatic. And so I'm going to share a little bit more about that, but I just want to walk you through what the services we provide are. So we provide pregnancy intervention services, right? So we operate a 24/7 crisis hotline. Somebody calls, they're going to get somebody on the phone, okay? So if they're really in a bad situation or they're really struggling, they can call us and we're going to be there and help them. We're going to connect them to one of our pregnancy centers for help. So just to give you an idea, so you can call, text, or chat our crisis hotline. Already this year, we have had over 50,000 calls, texts, and chats to our hotline. So the need is there. Then we get them connected to our pregnancy centers, and we have 4 pregnancy centers, 3 in Columbus, 1 in Lancaster, and we also have a family empowerment center. But in the pregnancy centers, we're going to treat them with love, compassion. We are non-judgment. We are meeting them exactly where they're at. As Pastor David said, I don't know where everybody stands in this room on this issue, but we're the service piece. They come to us for help. We're not out there dragging people off of the sidewalk, off the road. They're coming to us because they're looking for help. We do not deceive. We don't, we don't deceive. We tell them we don't provide abortions or refer for abortions, but here's how we can help you. We're going to give them a personalized consultation, and we're going to spend time with them because there's 3 categories of women that come to us. They are either abortion-minded. I'm here, I want my abortion, I want to get over this. I just want it to be done, okay? Or I'm not sure what I want to do. This is bad time for me. I don't have the support of the father of the baby. My family doesn't support me. I'm in the middle of college. I can't do this now. I'm single. I can't do this alone. There's a lot of reasons that would make them vulnerable to abortion. So you have the abortion-minded, and then you have those that are abortion vulnerable. That is where we can have the greatest impact, where we're going to then walk alongside them, provide them whatever resources they need. We partner with hundreds of organizations all over the city of Columbus, hundreds of churches that we love to send them to. You know, we want to, like I said, we want to help them physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So we want to connect them with the church family if we can. But we're going to take that time to really learn what is in between you and continuing to parent this child. And then we're going to provide them the resources. So the other side is you just care about the baby, you don't care about the mom. That's a lie. We care about the mom and the baby and the family. We want to have a significant difference in Ohio reducing infant mortality rates, right? That's what we want to do. So personalized consultations, pregnancy tests, ultrasounds. So last year we got brand new 3D, 4D ultrasounds. So we have 5 brand new machines. And I will tell you, that is the most intimate moment between that mom and one of our nurses. So the other side says we're fake clinics. Well, that's a lie. All of our pregnancy centers are run by registered nurses. That's who's providing the ultrasounds. We have a medical director who is a licensed OBGYN provider in Franklin County. He oversees all of our ultrasounds. He oversees our medical policies and procedures. We are very stringent in the services and how we provide those. So that's another lie. And so we're going to give her that ultrasound, and over 90% of women who see their baby on an ultrasound choose life because they're looking at that beating heart. I was just at the March for Life on Friday. Did anybody go? Did you hear the woman who spoke? So she found out she was pregnant. She was abortion-minded. She didn't have the support of the father of the baby. He was coercing her, and we see a lot of that. We also see human trafficking. We see victims of human trafficking, and we know what red flags to look for. So she was set to have an abortion because she said, I just wanted to please him. I didn't want to have the abortion, but I just wanted to please him. So she went to the doctor, and the doctor said, before you get your abortion, just see a counselor. So she went to a pregnancy center. She talked to somebody. They did an ultrasound, and these are her words. She said, in that ultrasound, I was still abortion-minded, but I looked at that ultrasound. Turns out she had twins, and one of her baby girls, she said, turned its face and looked at her. That was it. So what I'm saying is the ultrasound is one of our biggest tools. When Roe v. Wade came down in 1973, they didn't have ultrasound services. We are in a state where we have all of this medical technology, yet we're living on laws that were made decades before, right? So now we have this technology where the mother can see her baby, see that, hear a beating heart, and that changes lives, that saves lives. So that's really important. But then once we have provided those services, we're also going to link her to resources, get her connected to our parenting education program because we care about her. We want her to be the best parent she can be. Father of the baby gets involved. We specifically have dad-focused education classes too. So we have mom-focused, dad-focused, and family-focused education classes. And then they can shop in our baby boutiques and get all kinds of free items. I don't know if you guys have looked at the cost of diapers lately, but that's our number one request. So they can get free diapers, free wipes, clothing, car seats, pack and play, anything that they need as far as resources for the baby. We can get them or provide them. So that's our Family Empowerment Center. We also are in middle and high schools teaching kids about making healthy choice education. Guess why we started doing that back in 1984? Because we want to prevent those kids from becoming clients in our pregnancy centers. And you know what? The latest statistic is 85% of young adults are choosing abstinence. So what you hear and what they say versus what we hear and hear in our schools is totally different. So that's our youth education program. And then Pastor David talked about the aftermath of abortion. We see it every day. We see women who are traumatized by their abortion experience. And I'm going to go back to the abortion pill here. So there is a abortion pill clinic less than 3 miles from our busiest center on the north side. There are over 70 websites that women can obtain the abortion pill online. So to give you an idea of how dangerous this is, they had black box warnings on the first chemical pill, the mifepristone. There were black box warnings. Well, when COVID hit, those were removed so that women could continue to have access to abortion, self-managed abortions online. So we see women who are traumatized because they get these pills in the mail. And I was just talking to my nurse yesterday, and she said she just had a recent abortion pill reversal client. She came into our center and she had taken the abortion pill 10 p.m. the night before. We got a call 7 a.m. the next day. She immediately regretted it. That's what always happens. They immediately regret taking that pill. Once they take the pill, they're like, what did I do? I don't want to do this. And so then they start looking for help. Where they got the abortion pill isn't going to help them. So they're finding us, thank goodness. And we will get them into our center with a nurse to do an ultrasound to see the viability of the pregnancy. And then we connect her with one of our doctors who prescribes abortion pill reversal. Yes, it's possible. And it's successful 64 to 68% of the time. So thousands of babies have been saved. Over 4,000 babies in the United States have been born healthy as a result of abortion pill reversal. So when they say it's fake, it's not science, that's a lie, okay? Because it is. Because what I will tell you is what abortion pill reversal is. Guess what? It's progesterone. We flood their body with progesterone, which is what the chemical abortion pill took away. So if we do that, she has about 72 hours from the time she takes that first abortion pill to then start the reversal protocol. And like I said, it's successful 64 to 68% of the time. We have helped 35 women so far with abortion pill reversal services. And we're the only pregnancy center in Franklin County that does abortion pill reversal services. And we work with doctors that prescribe the protocol. The other thing that I will tell you about it is it's been used since the 1950s for women who were vulnerable to miscarriage. And so it's something that's been proven safe and effective for decades. But you will hear them say it's fake science, okay? So last year, tell me when my time's up. Because I'm like you, I could talk forever. Just do this. Last year, the Columbus City Council, didn't know the Columbus City Council had this much power, but when Roe v. Wade was overturned June 24th, they had to come up with their solution of how to continue women being able to have access to abortion. So on Friday at 4 p.m., they announced 3 new ordinances that they were going to vote on Monday at their last board meeting before their long recess. All of that done on purpose. So the 3 ordinances, 1, decriminalize abortion providers. In other words, we're not a reporting agency, so if a woman chooses abortion, we're going to continue to walk alongside her and get her connected to our abortion recovery programs, right? we're there to help her no matter what. Obviously, we want her to make a life decision, but if she doesn't, we're gonna continue to love her and show her the support she needs. So that was the first ordinances. And what they said is the police have better things to do than to search for women that should have reproductive rights making an abortion decision. So that's just false. The second ordinance was to fund Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio an additional $1 million of your taxpayer dollars to provide abortion services to women that, if they needed transportation, if they needed financial resources, $1 million. The third ordinance was to investigate crisis pregnancy centers in Columbus, Ohio. We're one of those, and we're the biggest, so we were a bullseye. We're always a bullseye. But we stand behind what the women say. And so they did, but guess who they had do the investigation? Yes, Pro-Choice Ohio, which was formerly NARAL, okay? Guess what? They paid them $26,500 to investigate pregnancy centers. That doesn't make sense to me, but that's what they did. Did they have anybody represented at the board meeting from pregnancy centers? No, but guess who they had at their board meeting? Pro-Choice Ohio. So they did this investigation. The report came out about 3 weeks ago. It's the same old stuff. We had lots of meetings on it. What do we do? Do we have legal issues? Can we sue them because it's lies and biased information? And so one of the things that we do, we just stand by who we are and what we do. And we have a positive response to any negative thing they said. And that's how we're dealing with it. But it's just interesting that we're here to help women who come to us for help, right? We want to provide that service. And Pastor David talked about, the vulnerable. Over 80% of the women we helped last year were at or below the national poverty level. And the majority of them were single, right? So that's who we serve. That's the majority of who we serve. You'll hear the argument of rape and incest. You'll hear the argument of, what he talked about here with physical abnormalities. Just to give you an idea, this is from Charlotte Lozier. Their latest report, rape and incest abortions were less than 0.3%. The risk to the woman's life or a major bodily function was 0.2%. Other physical health concerns, 2.5%. Abnormality in the unborn baby, 1.3%. But elective and unspecified, so these are just elective abortions, 96%. So you'll hear that argument, but we know the trauma of abortion. So in that case, when there is rape or incest, that is horrible. And whoever is responsible for that should be punished to the absolute highest crime possible. But then to force her to have an abortion on top of that is just a trauma on top of a trauma, right? And so that's why our abortion recovery programs and services are so important. So 1 in 4 women have experienced abortion. We see it every day. Most of the women involved in our abortion recovery program have had that in their past themselves, and they are now giving back to those and hopefully helping other women not go through the same thing. But there are so many medical, physical, mental issues associated with that trauma. And so we want to help women. So we have drop-in connection meetings. We have weekend retreats. We have Bible studies, 6 and 8 week support groups. We will continue to walk alongside her. So those are our 4 pillars of service: our pregnancy centers, our family empowerment center, our youth development, and our abortion recovery. And that's who we are here to serve, is women who reach out to us for help.
All right, well, Kathy, thank you so much. And Doug and I, as well as Teresa Drayling and Carmela, were all at the Columbus Gala and actually got to see Scott live. And he actually encouraged us partway through to turn on our cameras to video his 1-minute clip.
Yep.
So if any of you know Doug or I, we've got that 1-minute clip, and It is really just very compelling, so thank you. And Pastor David, thank you for bringing this topic to this group, because it is a very important topic, and not many pastors are actually bringing it to the congregations. And I'm a part of a team that meets, that talks about what is a life team. And that group of individuals around the country get on a Zoom call and we talk about becoming a life team, what you do as a life team. And many of them will say they don't have the backing or the strong backing of a pastor or an elder group to bring this topic that is critical to the congregation and to all those unborn children. So what is a life team? Who knows what a life team is here? Okay, Michelle, you in the back should raise your hand, because I know you do, because you're one of us. So 3 or 4 years ago, when I was asked to consider bringing a life team to NAPC, I'm like, what is a life team? So as I started researching it, I found out that as defined by the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, the EPC, and Presbyterians Protecting Human Life, it is a group of people who can help equip members and attendees to address the most urgent social issues of our time. This is an urgent social issue, and it is something that we should be considering. A life team is a small group of people within a church that affirm the sanctity of human life and encourages others in and around the church and community to affirm the sanctity of human life. The foundational motivation for a life team is the gospel. So what is written in our word, and staying true to that. At New Albany Presbyterian Church, we launched the life team in May of this year when it was approved by the elders. And it's a small group of individuals who are championing life in our church and community and partnering with agencies, providing services in the area of parenting and pro-life, PDHC. We are also looking for one in the area of adoption. And then we're partnering with one on foster care, Alicia's Closet, and I'll talk more about each of those as I go through the conversation. So who are the NAPC Life Team members? So I am leading it. We've been in existence, we've been working on it for probably about 1.5 years, but actually launched in May. Our members are Carmela and Teresa Drelling, who unfortunately are unable to be here today. They had a funeral to attend, I heard, so prayers for them. Tanner Fixari, he's one of our members. Andrea Hayes, Michelle Singh, who is in the back with us today. And we also have had Barbie Healy, who's been a part of the team, who is recently needing to step away because of some changes in her profession. So we will be looking for others who may like to help participate with us as we go forward. So the NAPC Life Team Ministry supports both in and out pillars of our mission. We can support members of our church and community with life decisions that are biblically based, guided in prayer, and able to connect them to the services that align with God's written word. The NAPC Life Team relies on God's guidance to educate, inform, serve, and encourage our church and community to be a gospel-driven proponent of life. So, how do we do that? On the outside, we are working with PDHC in doing various services with them. As we have not had a building to date, our initial ways of partnering with PDHC has been to work with bundling diapers from large groups. As Kathy said, they need lots of diapers, but when the moms come in or the dads come in to the center to get the diapers, they have to be in certain size bundles. So we go in there, we help and bundle them into the appropriate sizes so the parent can come in and pick them up. In the future, and if you're interested in doing that, you can contact Teresa, because Teresa is coordinating that effort. In the future, we will also be working on other types of donations that are needed by PDHC, as well as volunteering to help in the free store and other events that they may have. As we have our church building, we'll be able to sponsor baby showers for, they're kind of, you don't know who the mother is per se, but we'll have a baby shower. We can get items and support women who come into the center. We'll also be able to partner on the bottle baby drives that I think some of you have known about in the past and asked us about, so we will be working with that. And for those that are interested, you can get additional training to actually work in the facilities that are around Columbus and help in the actual centers that are providing the services. In the future, we hope to also be able to support an agency in the area of adoption. We've been kind of looking, and we had said that that would be one we would consider after we kind of got the first two up and running. And so in happening to talk to Pastor David just recently, as we were looking for one that's got connections with faith and with Christ, he had the name of one. So we'll begin investigating that as one that we can potentially partner with in that area. For foster care, you may have heard Andrea Hayes do the initial Minute for Mission on the Life team. She had just then partnered with Alicia's Closet and done a respite night where they allow the foster families to bring the children into a location, and then the parents can go out. They have members that have been approved there in the centers to the churches to then take care of the kids, while the parents can go out and actually do some shopping, go out to dinner. So all in the thought process of how do we support the unborn, and how do we support those children that are brought to life, where the parents do make that choice, but may not be able to actually parent them and or raise them. So how do we help support both in the foster care system and or the adoption area as well? So some of you may be thinking, okay, that sounds good. It's a good effort. So why get involved? Why did I get involved? Well, it's personal for me. My mom got pregnant with me at 15. She wasn't married. It was in El Paso, Texas, and she got pregnant by a man young man that was 18 years old, kind of from the other side of the tracks. He was kind of who she wanted to kind of get pregnant with so that she could move out of the home that she had been adopted into. She wasn't happy there. So this was a way for her to get out. Well, my dad's mom did not want him to get married and did not want this person to have this child. So if abortion was easy at that point in time, I probably wouldn't be here, because my grandmother would have driven what became her daughter-in-law to get an abortion. My grandmother became my best friend. I mean, she felt guilty for years thinking about the fact that I might not have been there, because she didn't want her son, firstborn son, oldest son, to get married and have a kid at 18. Well, till the day she passed, she was my best friend, she was my champion, she was everything. So, as I looked at my son Friday, Doug and I had lunch with him, my youngest son, and he just had his first child. I said, and if it weren't for laws that protect the unborn, I wouldn't be here. I looked at him and I said, and neither would you. And neither would that grandbaby. So it is personal for me, and it's not always easy to talk about it. I'm glad I was able to share that, but it was leading up to it that I was probably more nervous than when I was actually talking about it. But I want to help the unborn child. And our team of individuals that have come together, every one of them is busy. Every one of them has tons on their plate. But they all felt passionate to say, I want to be there. I want to help bring this to our church. And our goal is to help both as we partner with these agencies, and also to be a voice inside our church, to be able to talk to the youth groups, the parents, small groups on what does it look like to be pro-life. what does it look like biblically to support this in a time when our world really wants to go the other way? So I ask each of you to consider what you want to do as you go forward to support this ministry. I do have some sign-up sheets in the back if you have interest in knowing more about the Life Team, PDHC, and or Alicia's Closet. Feel free to sign your name on that. They're the same forms I had at the Minute for Mission, or the Mission Fair that we had. So I got quite a bit of interest there. So feel free to sign that up or ask me any questions or any of the team members. So with that, I'll turn it back to David, and then we can open it up for questions.
Sure. Just want to give anybody a chance to ask any questions or comment on any of the content, maybe a little bit more about what Kathy does and what the Life Team, if you want to know more. We really are looking for more folks to drive this ministry within the church. And so if the Lord is leading you, if you're here because you're interested in this kind of thing, we would love for you to find out more about being on the Life Team. I would like to start with the first question really for you, Kathy, and that is, what are the have you talked about or thought about the changes that would happen, if any, with PDHC if issue 1 does pass? Are there any implications that you're aware of that would immediately be a problem with the ministry?
Really good question. I will tell you the goal of this is when you talked about like slippery slope, that's exactly what this is. Ohio is the only state this year where this campaign is focused on. The billions of dollars that they're spending, it's for Ohio. And you know why? Because they know if they can get this passed in Ohio, they can go anywhere. You know how many states they have targeted next year? 11. This year, it's just Ohio. Yeah. But that's a really good question because their goal, this is how they get in, right? So the Ohio Constitution only requires a 50% plus 1 majority to amend our Constitution. The United States Constitution takes 2/3 vote, as does most every other constitution for any state in the country, right? Ohio, it's 50% plus 1. That's why they're targeting Ohio. This happened in Michigan. Does everybody know what Michigan's happening in Michigan now? It happened in Kansas City. So right now, this has been a 0 for 6. 6 have failed, or well, passed, sorry. We want this to fail, but it has passed in 6 states. We're the target this year. So their target, the goal of this is to close down pregnancy resource centers. That's their goal. That's what it is. So it would literally 50 plus years of pregnancy centers helping thousands and hundreds of thousands and saving hundreds of thousands of lives. It wouldn't happen. That's their goal.
Okay.
So this is just the first step.
Questions? Comments?
I don't think we realize how important Ohio is. I was prayer coordinator for Ohio for the National Day of Prayer for 4 years. And you think Ohio, could be California, should be New York, but no, it's Ohio. It's very, very important. They got their eyes on that. They know what they're doing by picking Ohio. They sure do.
Yep.
Thanks. Bebida.
I want to thank the elders of our church for allowing this.
Absolutely.
There can be so much confusion if you just watch those commercials. This has been so helpful, and also in providing materials that we can pass on to others so they understand exactly what they're voting for, or rather what they're voting against.
Did you hear that, Rob?
I heard it.
Brett, did you hear that back there? Good.
Have you been able to coordinate with other pastors and other churches so they understand this issue? That's one thing we're trying to do, get into. I've got several other pastors I'm calling this week and say, can you give me 15 minutes? But you gotta explain it just right or you're not gonna get a chance.
The answer is no. Other than having conversations. I had one very in-depth conversation with the pastor. It was not planned out. It just happened. I had a very productive conversation, but we have not taken the time to strategically reach out to other pastors.
Pastor David, Kathy.
I will tell you though, the governor has.
Yeah.
So were you there?
Yeah.
So I was there. Did you see me? I was there. Oh, was it? So it was at the governor's mansion?
Last Thursday?
He had that pastor's. Yeah.
We
He's
were
had
there.
several of them.
Yes. So the governor is doing it. I tell you, Center for Christian Virtue, you have their materials. They are all over the state of Ohio. There is so much efforts out there, and I hope it, is successful for us, because if you watch the other side, it seems like they're winning. I'm hoping, the sad part is, in August, it didn't pass, which is why it's now on the November election, right? So that's really important. That's where I say educate yourself. But there are plenty of organizations who will come and speak to your church. Center for Christian Virtue, Ohio Right to Life, Greater Columbus Right to Life. And if you go to the website, Protect Women Ohio, if you haven't seen this side of commercials, you can see all of their information, and it's made up of all of these organizations. And it was specifically, they looked at Michigan and saw why it happened in Michigan, and they've really tried to improve so that it doesn't happen in Ohio. But it's the same company, it's the same marketing company. The other side hired the same marketing company that made it, pass. But here, we are using the same marketing company that has had other success. We just don't have the funding. Well, I don't mean we, they don't have the funding.
And just to be clear, we have not gone into issue 1 because in 2 weeks we are going to. So in 2 weeks, on the 22nd at 2 o'clock from 2 to 4 p.m., Pastor Ken and Greg Mellick, Greg is a member of our church and an attorney, they are going to jointly talk about issue 1 and the cultural and the legal implications of issue 1 to continue to educate you on this matter.
Are you familiar that, you probably know about Pastor Brian Williams? Maybe not. He got together, he's Afro-American, got together 100 pastors, Afro-American pastors in the state of Ohio, working on this issue.
Was he at the March for Life?
Yeah.
He was at the March for Life, yeah.
There's a letter that's out there,
Yeah.
Signatures of.
great
Yes.
letter that's out there about
Yeah.
issue 1, 100 African American leaders who have come together to put this out there that they're opposed.
Yeah, I know Dr. David Forbes is
Yeah.
also very involved. He came and took a tour of one of our centers, and he's very active in it
Yeah.
also, the Columbus Christian Center.
Any other questions? Dan?
Just a little comment. In a graduation speech, Lou Holt said, there's never a right time to do a wrong thing, and never a wrong time to do a right thing. And I would add, November 7th was the right time to do the right thing. That's what we know.
That's right. And the one other thing I would add is there is some encouragement from CCV and others to vote early,
Yeah.
because the early voting definitely can be beneficial as far as trending and some of the things. We're also going to have the signs that people can put in their yards if they want to take them. Vote no for issue 1. So Doug's put some of those together, so they'll be in the back.
Yeah, I was
as
just
well.
going to close with that if you want more materials, over on the table are some of these handouts. And if you do want to sign, we do have signs. Obviously, you aren't compelled to, but if you would like one, would love for you to take one. And I haven't talked to Leah about this, but I think our plan is on October 23rd. After we remove the grand opening signs for the church, we will put that vote no on issue 1 out in our yard. Of course, that's the next step. If you believe this, now if you don't believe this, you're still working through it, it's fine. But if you do believe this, to sort of publicly stand it's a courageous thing.
I feel like we're all being called to be Esthers. That was the theme of our galas this year, was for such a time as this, from Esther 4. And I think this is just a time for all of us to be bold.
Yep. With that, I will pray for us and then we'll go. Lord, thank you so much for Kathy, for her great work that she does with PDHC. We pray, God, that you would provide for these health centers as they provide for women who are terribly conflicted, who are impoverished, who are struggling, who can't see any light at the end of the tunnel. Pray that you would continue to use them and empower those health centers so that women choose to bear their children and to raise them. And if they can't raise them, to put them in families that are capable. So we continue to pray for her work. Holy Spirit, please fill her and use her. And Lord, thank you for the NAPC Life Team. Thank you for Beth. Thank you for her story. And Lord, that her mom was not able to abort her. And here she is with this incredible generational legacy of faithfulness to you. And we're grateful. We pray that there would be more stories like this. And we pray, Lord, that you would, I pray for everyone here as they seek to more deeply understand the theological reasons why Christians believe that everyone is made in the image of God and that we ought to protect the vulnerable, the implications for those two beliefs as it relates to the unborn, and just pray that we would be strong, that we would be bold. May we glorify you, Lord, and may we serve those women and those babies that need it the most. And Lord, I pray lastly for anyone in this room who has been impacted negatively by abortion. And I pray that they would know that you are a God who loves and who forgives, and that you are true to your word. You love, and you're good all the time. So we're grateful, Lord. We thank you for this time together. We pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, everyone, for coming.